Hey everyone, today I wanted to start with maybe a series on critiquing Michel Foucault. At least for today, I want to start by looking at how Matt McManus thinks about these issues and potential critiques of Foucault. Foucault is, of course, a French theorist, best known with post-structuralism and postmodernist turns in humanities disciplines, and a turn away from Marxism, or at least traditional, classical, vulgar Marxism, etc. That is what a lot of people in humanities now see as overly economic, deterministic, and class reductionist. If you're interested in me doing a deep dive on those issues separately, let me know, and maybe I'll make a video. But for today, like I said, I want to talk about how Matt McManus talks about critiquing Foucault. And so I talked to Matt McManus recently, and he actually recommended 3 sources to really, look at the work of Foucault, build your own critiques, or build off the critiques of others. And so the first source is Michel Foucault's actual personal Birth of Biopolitics lectures. These were, I don't know, maybe at the end of the 70s, like 79, but could have been 80, not exactly sure. But basically, McManus sees these lectures as Foucault's, and really the humanities discipline and social sciences, etc., biggest engagement with neoliberal theory yet. And Foucault specifically works a little bit with Gary Becker, who laid out a lot of the moral foundations for neoliberal theory in a positive light, right? So you could say he wants to be a neoliberal, right? He's laying out the moral foundation for why it's the right system. And McManus says basically that in these lectures, Foucault seems to like a lot of what Becker has to say on his own. And this may seem strange just as a claim, but it's less strange if you really interrogate these lectures deeply. That's what McManus says. And if you don't interrogate these lectures deeply yourself, or if you do and you don't come to some sort of critical conclusion of Foucault, there are 2 works that McManus recommended I read, at least, to get this sort of more, I wouldn't say holistic, but more at least critical interpretation of Foucault that you're not going to get as often in humanities departments today or elsewhere in mainstream intellectual spaces, where Foucault is praised as like this very radical, rebellious, subversive actor against capitalism, and like someone that you were supposed to idolize or express yourself through somehow. But basically, in the first book that McManus recommends is Nicholas Rose's interpretation of Foucault. That's not what the book's called, but Nicholas Rose is the author. He's worked on a couple things related to Foucault, and Nicholas Rose's interpretation of Foucault is seeing that Foucault analyzed biopolitics in a critical way, yes, but that he was also, he had his own ethics of self-creation and individualism, which is a bit too close to neoliberal doctrines of becoming, who you are, your best self, who you want to be, and more specifically like lifestyle fetishism and the quote-unquote neoliberal self. And so then the other book that McManus recommended to me is by Jürgen Habermas, the famous critical theorist from, I don't know if he's around anymore, but a lot of his works on this topic came in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But after the Birth of Biopolitics lectures and whatever else Foucault was doing at the time, Habermas wanted to critique him, right? So he wrote this book called The Philosophical Discourse of Modernity. I don't think it's all about Foucault, but in there, Habermas' critiques Foucault as a sort of young or rising new conservative, right? So Philosophical Discourse of Modernity casts Foucault as a fundamentally reactionary figure who makes a very conservative argument about why people are embedded to historical context, and that change can only happen incrementally, if that, rather than through radical transformation. And it's an interesting critique, one that McManus says he is not fully on board with and maybe even disagrees with. But it's interesting because everyone thinks, like I said, of Foucault as this radical figure, and in reality, the sort of views he has on individualism and self-creation and expression as like the ultimate sort of expression, as the ultimate act as a human agent is, these beliefs are honestly kind of like what you might find reading Edmund Burke, who is a very famous conservative figure who, focuses on individualism, of course. So I don't know. It's interesting. Obviously, I haven't even gotten into the Birth of Biopolitics lectures myself, besides some snippets. I've not read Nicholas Rose's interpretation of Foucault, but I have read Daniel Zamora's interpretations of Foucault, specifically that, by the 70s or late 70s or 80s, Foucault really was like being a bit too amenable to neoliberal ideals of self. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to diving into the actual lectures and into Nicholas Rose's interpretation and through Habermas's philosophical discourse of modernity. If you'd like me to talk a little bit more about this, then I'd be happy to continue this series. Regardless, I probably will. So thank you. Bye.